Good evening, and welcome to the United States Senate Republican primary debate for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm Allan Stam, Dean of the Batten School, and your host for this event. Those present have joined with us to exchange views and learn more about the candidates vying for the Virginia Republican nomination for the United States Senate. Let me state for the record the ground rules we agreed to in an effort to advance the public interest in such a conversation. The Batten School has held dozens of discussions with elected officials and policymakers. None have been subject to disruption or allegations of partisan imbalance. The list of guests with whom Batten students have interacted include Governors Robert McDonald, Terry McAuliffe, one a Republican, one a Democrat, Senators Jim Webb, Mark Warner, and Tim Kaine. Previous Republican Democratic representatives of the 5th District, Robert Hurt and Tom Perriello, and many other members, from Robert Scott and Jerry Connolly on the left to Tom Davis and Eric Cantor on the right. Our Batten students have also engaged on grounds with presidential candidates as well as former Supreme Court justices, top intelligence, defense, and NGO leaders. This is a central part of what we do here at the Batten School and at the University of Virginia. As public servants, we challenge assumptions. We listen to views, frequently, especially to those with whom we disagree, and then we search for common ground. As dean, I remain deeply committed to the principles of academic freedom and civil discourse which guide such efforts. We've made every possible effort tonight to ensure the fairness of these exchanges, so central to our democracy. I will vigorously oppose any efforts to deny you these rights. When we were approached by the college Republicans to co-host this event, each of us here at the Batten School viewed this as both an academic opportunity and part of our public responsibility. Our students are preparing to lead and shape public policy. Our nation desperately needs to find more ways to hold a civil, fact-based conversation about community, state, national, and international issues. We are thrilled tonight to be joined by audience members from locations throughout the Commonwealth, in addition to Batten School students and guests of the candidates. Access to this debate has been limited only by the fire marshal, who has capped this, our school's largest room, at 180 seats. As moderator, I invite questions from all of you. Submit them with your name and topic on the cards or pieces of paper provided if you have not done so already. In an effort to ensure fairness, questioners' cards will be selected by the staff sitting behind me. I'll reserve the right to ensure that your questions have been responded to directly with follow-ups when I deem necessary. What I ask and expect of each of you, my fellow community members, is simply what my mother used to call good manners. Please refrain from shouting, clapping, cheering, and booing. This is our largest classroom. We do not, and I will not, tolerate actions that violate the rights of others present to hear and be heard. Since we're in a pretty crowded room, we're not on a tiered floor, please don't wave any signs if you have one in your pocket. Please don't shout or clap while the candidates are speaking. We'll begin with 2-minute opening statements, then we'll pose questions to the candidates in order. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to the question directed to him. The other 2 candidates will have 60 seconds, either to respond directly to the first candidate's answer or to provide whatever information they care to. Now, let's begin with a warm welcome to our 3 candidates, Delegate Nick Freitas, Chairman Corey Stewart, and Bishop E.W. Jackson. Thank you very much. So let's get started with opening statements. Delegate Freitas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Again, thank you for hosting this to the College Republicans, to the Batten School, and all of you for being here. So my name is Nick Freitas. I'm currently serving as a delegate in the Virginia House of Delegates representing the 30th District, which is Culpeper, Orange, and Madison County, so just right up the road from here. One of the reasons why I got into politics, because I originally started off as a soldier, and that's really how I thought I was going to live my life. I'm tired of politics in this country devolving into basically a competition between personalities. I think politics in a free republic needs to be about ideas. And right now I see a philosophical battle that's going on within our country right now, and I really think we're at a crossroads where we're going to determine what direction that we go really for the next generation. And we're either going to go more toward a philosophy of control or we're going to go toward a philosophy of individual liberty. And I have always believed in maximizing individual liberty. It's incredibly important to me because one thing my military service taught me was that the more countries I went to where the government presumed to try to micromanage people's lives, they always did so under the auspices of taking care of people, and they always inevitably not only oppressed them but denigrated them as a result. So maximizing individual liberty and reminding government that it has three core functions to play. It needs to protect your liberty, which is simply your right to live your life in accordance with your definition of happiness, not the government's, provided that you don't infringe on the right of someone else to do the same. It's about securing opportunity through the free market, you being able to go into the marketplace and exchange your time, your talents, and your ideas with others for the betterment of yourself, your family, and society. And then finally, to provide equal justice before the law so that no matter who you are, no matter where you came from, no matter who your parents were, or what your political connections are, when you stand before the law in this country, you are to be judged based on the facts and evidence against you and nothing else. Those are the things that I am absolutely passionate about. And that is what this country needs to stand for. And that's the reason why I'm running for the United States Senate, is because I want that philosophy, not just an individual candidate. I want that philosophy to be prevalent because I believe that's the one that allows individuals to flourish. Thank you.
Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart.
Thank you, and I want to thank you, Professor, and thank the college Republicans for putting this on today. I'm not running to unify the GOP. I am not running to keep things the same in the United States Senate. I am running to disrupt the United States Senate and to disrupt our government in Washington. And I am not here to make friends. I'm not here because I want to reaffirm the propaganda which you've been fed by your professors. And I'm not here to try to make you feel safe, because you are not. The Constitution, which protects you and your rights, is under threat each and every day. And it's occurring right here at UVA, and it's occurring at college campuses across the United States. 4 in 10 of you, I have no question, when you come to this university, and your other colleagues across this country go to their universities, that they come as some of the best and the brightest. But when you leave, you come back with some ideas that are antithetical to the United States. 4 in 10 of you believe that it's okay to ban hate speech. Question is, who defines hate speech? 1/2 of you believe it's okay to shout down somebody who has beliefs that are different than yours. And the same half believes it's okay to ban those beliefs and that speech. And 20% of you believe it's okay to attack someone physically because you find their speech offensive. My question to all of you is this: what happens when it's your speech which somebody else finds offensive? What happens when it's your speech which somebody seeks to ban? And what happens when it is you who is attacked simply for expressing your First Amendment rights? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Next, we have Bishop Jackson.
My name is E.W. Jackson. Not 35 miles from here in Orange County, Virginia, 220 years ago, a man by the name who was given the name Gabriel, later took the name Jackson, was born into slavery. That was my great-grandfather. A few years later, my great-grandmother, Eliza, also born into slavery in Orange County, Virginia. My grandfather was born there. Now, little did they know that while they came here under the most horrendous circumstances, they were called into the greatest experiment in human freedom that the world has ever known, and that their great-grandson and the children coming after me would experience more opportunity and more hope and more privilege and more possibility to fulfill their God-given potential than they would ever experience anywhere else on the face of the earth. I love this country, and I'm running for the United States Senate because I believe that the privileges and the possibilities and the opportunities that have been bequeathed to me, in spite of the imperfections of our country, are worth passing on to you and worth arguing about to persuade your fellow students that America is indeed a noble nation. that we were birthed into the horrendous circumstances that the whole world was in. Subjugation. Remember, our founding fathers were born into a situation in which one person had control over everything and everybody and all property. They gave us something better. I want to fight to make sure that we give that to you and to your children's children, and that you become convinced and your fellow students become convinced that America is indeed the greatest experiment in human freedom in the history of mankind, and that the constitutional republic that we've been given provides more freedom and opportunity than anything that's ever existed on the face of the earth. And yes, while we may disagree on some issues, that legacy is worth fighting for. I want to be a member of the United States Senate to fight for your future and for the future of those who will come after you. Thank you.
Bishop Jackson. All right, now we're going to shift gears and begin with some questions. We'll start with the first question to Delegate Freitas. He'll have 2 minutes to answer the question. The other two candidates will then you'll have 90 seconds. The other two candidates will have 60 seconds to respond. We'll begin with a question from Greer Kelly from Charlottesville, Virginia. Many of us believe that Congress is currently failing to address our greatest public policy challenges. What previous experiences would make you an effective lawmaker, and what strategies would you use to be effective if elected?
So obviously I currently serve in a state legislature, and so we face a lot of the similar challenges. Obviously some things are different, but a lot of the mechanics are very similar. A lot of the issues and a lot of the fundamental questions that we have to answer, that we have to work through are pretty much identical to what you would see within the United States Congress. One of the things I want to point out is that, again, once we get past the vitriol that often happens in campaigns, and we actually sit down in rooms, we're able to just talk together on identifying what the problem is and then identifying what the solution is. All of a sudden, talking about the process becomes a whole lot easier. And I'll give you an example of this. I carried the bill on civil asset forfeiture reform this year in the General Assembly, and it's unfortunately didn't get all the way as far as it should have, but it got a decent way. I had the Tea Party, the Family Foundation, and the ACLU all standing there advocating on behalf of that bill. And one of the things I found that is sorely lacking in American political discourse these days is I believe very deeply in my political philosophy and the policy positions that derive from that. And I expect everybody to have different beliefs with respect to that. But when we sit down and we talk, we can spend all of our time talking about the 10 things we disagree on, or we can spend our time talking about the 1 or 2 things that we do agree on. And once we get past the vitriol and the rhetoric, and we just focus on if we both agree that there is a problem and that there is a needed solution, and we can focus on what the end state looks like instead of getting completely torn down into the process and the campaign aspect of it, you can arrive at solutions. It's one of the reasons why, even though I have A ratings from every single conservative organization out there, I've been endorsed by members of the Green Party. It's not because I all of a sudden decided to compromise on a core issue. It was because I found what we agreed on, and then we focused on that, and I had them be a part of the process, and we got the legislation passed.
Chairman Stewart?
You know what the most useless language in the English language is? I submitted a bill. Who cares? What matters is whether you got the job done. Now, there are 3 chairmen in Northern Virginia who are countywide elected. I'm one of them. The other 2 are Democrats. It's a county of 465,000 residents. It's 55% minority, and I am the only Republican who's been able to win countywide in Prince William County or anywhere in Northern Virginia for that matter since 2009. And I have governed as a hardcore conservative. I became the first and led the nation's toughest crackdown on illegal immigration. I became the first county to eliminate the concealed carry permit fee. And just recently, and we're going to get this accomplished, we'll become the first in Virginia to place retired police officers in each of our 94 schools. We're going to get that done. That is how I get elected. That's how I'm the only Republican to get elected, because I have a knack, I have an understanding of how to get things accomplished, and that's why I get the vote. Not just the Republicans, but independents and even some Democrats.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson.
You know, most people in political life, which I never call myself a politician, but most people in political life are thermometers, not thermostats. That is, they try to figure out where everybody stands and then reflect that. But that's not leadership. I think leadership requires seeing where we are and where we need to go and trying to persuade people that this is the direction in which we ought to move. And so one of the things I plan to do is to be a leader in the United States Senate, whether Mitch McConnell gives me a position of leadership or not, to persuade people that the ideas I have are right. For example, I have an idea that September ought to be declared Celebration of American History Month, because that's the month that our Constitution was voted upon. And we need to teach our people about our history and its nobility. Yes, it's not perfect, but there's much there to admire. I want to be not only a leader in the Senate, but I think we need cultural leadership, because we've got to persuade people to begin to look at things differently in order to get politics to reflect a different set of values. So when I go, I intend to immediately start to try to persuade my colleagues and persuade you and the people who vote for me and those who didn't vote for me that we need to start to approach our problems in a different way.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Our next question will direct first to Chairman Stewart. This question comes to us from Matthew Cuser from Fredericksburg, Virginia. And the issue is transportation. Those of us living off I-95 face a daily struggle of needing to use a roadway incapable of supporting the amount of traffic it has. President Trump has promised to improve our infrastructure. Do you agree with the president on using federal dollars to improve our infrastructure, such as I-95, or should it primarily be left up to the states?
In 2013, the General Assembly passed the biggest tax increase in Virginia history. And they did it with the promise that all of the funds that would be raised by that tax would be used to construct roads around the Commonwealth of Virginia. Just a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago in fact, the General Assembly, including my colleague here to my right, voted in favor of a bill, HB 1539, that took $500 million out of road construction in Virginia that was promised for road construction and is giving it to the failed DC metro system. That's not how to lead, folks. I know how to lead. Here in my county, in Prince William County, I've been leading the biggest road construction program in the Commonwealth of Virginia, even larger than Fairfax County, which is the county of twice the size of Prince William. Yes, I do believe that the federal government does have some responsibilities in building out the interstate system. It never would have been built if it hadn't been for the Eisenhower administration and those in the 1950s who looked ahead and realized that the United States needed a modern infrastructure system, both for national security and for our economy to grow. The fact of the matter is that I-81 in particular is overstressed. We've got traffic coming all the way down the East Coast from Maine to Florida coming down 81. It is used, it's a national highway. It's not just the responsibility of Virginians to pay for that. It's a national asset, and it needs to be improved. And so, yes, I would be in favor of supporting, and I will be supporting President Trump's legislation to use federal funding to improve I-81 and I-95.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson, you have 60 seconds.
Well, first of all, let me just mention that I tell people all the time who have real problems with President Trump, don't pay attention to his tweets. Pay attention to his actions. And I think President Trump is absolutely right. We have a major infrastructure problem in our country, and yes, it is a responsibility even under the Constitution, which gives Congress the ability to regulate interstate commerce, and our road systems are part of interstate commerce. I mean, you can't do interstate commerce without a decent road system. When we got bridges collapsing and we got major problems on our roads, certainly the federal government has a responsibility to do something. And yes, I think that the states in some cases, and I think here in Virginia in some cases, when money is appropriated for these purposes, they don't always quite seem to go where they're supposed to go. That really is a matter for the states to handle, but the federal government does have a responsibility to make sure that we have interstate commerce functioning properly, and our road system is part of that.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Delegate Freitas, you have 60 seconds.
So to answer the question, yeah, the federal government does have a limited role to play with respect to transportation, a larger transportation infrastructure, which is clearly not just roads, right? It's a whole multitude of various transportation mechanisms. But having said that, one of the biggest problems I have with the way the federal government currently operates itself is, one, it never seems to really peruse Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution to focus on its enumerated powers. And two, I'm tired of money constantly leaving the state, leaving the locality, going to the federal government, being run through a huge federal bureaucracy, and then a fraction of the money being sent back with a number of strings attached. Does anybody think that's a good recipe for effective and efficient transportation infrastructure spending? I certainly don't think it is. I think the more money that we actually leave at the local and state level, the more you're going to find transportation solutions which actually service the people in those communities. Because the communities or the challenges facing transportation in Southwest are not the challenges facing Northern Virginia. So the limited role that the federal government has with respect to some issues with harbors, with interstates, sure, that's fine. But as much as possible, give control back to the states and the localities to be able to spend that money in a way that actually makes sense for the locality and the population that is using it.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Our next question is directed to Bishop Jackson. You'll have 90 seconds. The question comes from Connor Byron from Northampton County out on the Eastern Shore. The question is about climate change and sea level rise. What policies do you support to mitigate the damage that will be caused by sea level rise over the next century to important industrial and residential areas on Virginia's coastline, especially on the Eastern Shore?
Well, first of all, look, in spite of what the mainstream media would tell you, there are differences of opinion among scientists on the degree to which climate change poses a major problem for the future of the world. I happen to have the view that the climate is like human beings. You know, we are homeostatic beings. That means that we have a tendency, our bodies, to adjust to the environment around us. I just don't happen to be one of those people who believes that driving SUVs is going to cause the planet to spin off its axis. But on the other hand, I think that we ought to be focused on stewardship of our environment rather than what amounts to ultimate control of private property and people's ability to build and for us to grow economically. Stewardship means clean air, clean water, making sure that we preserve the beauty of our environment, which I think every American can agree on, whether you're coming from the left or the right. But some of these proposals coming out of the EPA and some of these efforts to overregulate and control people's private property, I just think are misplaced. I would change the name of the EPA to the Department of Environmental Stewardship and focus on educating the American people, most of whom want to be responsible with regard to our environment.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Delegate Freitas?
I think when we get into the whole topic of anthropogenic global warming, because that ends up being the issue, right? Unfortunately, we can't just look at what the climate is doing and we can't just look at the actual effects that it's having on something like the coastline. It instantly it's used as this political football on whether or not you subscribe to certain larger policy objectives with respect to reducing carbon emissions, et cetera, et cetera. To answer this specific question, whether it's anthropogenic global warming or whether it's sea levels rising for some other reason, doesn't mean a whole lot to the person that's actually contending with the issue, right? And one of the things that we need to do is again, don't use issues as a political football. If we have sea level rise that is affecting the Eastern Shore, is affecting Virginia Beach and the Virginia coast, what are the proper mechanisms that we can use in order to combat that? And I think that there is a limited role, again, with the federal government, especially when we're talking about a huge naval base down in Norfolk, on how do we go there and ensure that we reinforce the shoreline and what is the proper dredging mechanisms that we have to use. But once again, if we reinforce private property rights and people actually have an incentive to take care of their own property, combined with allowing state and local officials to be able to develop solutions that work best for their own shore erosion problems, that's where you're actually going to get the solutions that actually work and address the issue instead of turning the issue itself into some sort of political football that politicians fight about. So again,
Delegate
I'll leave it there.
Chairman Stewart.
I believe that the theory of man-made climate change is a hoax. Look, we have a lot of environmental issues, but they're worldwide. The Paris Accord limited carbon emissions in the United States and in Western Europe and Canada, Australia, and Japan, but guess who it did not limit? The Chinese, did not limit the Indians, did not limit the huge economic growth that is going on in the Far East. The fact of the matter is that the Paris Accord and other international agreements which would have limited carbon emissions would also have limited the growth of our economy. So I support President Trump in withdrawing from the Paris Accord. But here's something, and this all goes back down to the main issue which I brought out at the beginning, and that is free speech. You know, if you go onto this campus or any other campus across this country and you say that you don't believe in climate change, you're berated, you're ridiculed, you're called a denier. The only way we can get to the truth is through free speech, and that includes on this issue.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart.
Thank you.
We're going to continue on the environmental vein. The next question will be aimed to address to Delegate Freitas to begin. Comes from Matthew Nails in Yorktown, Virginia. Carbon dividends are an idea proposed by Republican leaders to combat climate change through free market principles. Essentially, carbon dividends are a carbon tax on emissions coming from factories, ports, wells, whatever, with all proceeds going to American families. What is your stance on this proposal?
I think one of the problems that we have, again, with the whole issue of anthropogenic global warming is that we keep going back to this idea of we have scientists that are researching the issue with respect to climate, and then they come to a particular conclusion, and then they immediately go into a policy discussion. So they may be infinitely qualified to make determinations with respect to what is going on within the climate, even though it's an incredibly complex subject. But then that doesn't necessarily translate into now they're experts with respect to public policy, economics, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem I have with the carbon credits and whatnot is, once again, we're not allowing the free market to work. If you really want to ensure that we have good stewardship of the environment, enforcing private property rights is absolutely critical, because now if you're engaging in polluting activity and it's affecting my property, I now have a grievance against you and I can go to the courts and I can get compensation as a result. But if we bring the government in to micromanage the process, that becomes problematic, because now not only are we not necessarily achieving our goal and we're infringing on property rights, but a lot of times we see issues like with the catalytic converter, where the federal government comes in and says you have to use this particular method, even though technology catches up with a better method for protecting the environment and greater fuel efficiency, at the same time that now we've restricted producers and innovators to an old technology. So I think overall, when we look at the environment, we need to protect private property rights. We need to allow the free market to work. So that way, when we get to things like renewables, it happens through the free market as opposed to government subsidization and regulation, which I think ultimately stunts innovation and creativity.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart, you've got 60 seconds.
I think we're beating a dead horse here. I think the only thing I'm going to add to this is that if you do believe that carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions lead to man-made global warming, the answer is not to try to limit it through regulation, folks. The answer has always been the same. Those economies that are furthest developed are the least polluters. The United States in the 19th century, our environment, whether it's water quality or air quality, was in terrible shape. But as we've progressed, as our technology has improved, we've become cleaner. And we are on the cusp of a revolution, by the way, in the automotive industry, the first one really since the automobile was invented. And that is, in just a few short years, you're no longer going to be driving gasoline-powered engines, you're going to be driving battery-powered engines and motors, and that is going to make a huge difference in reducing emissions. Again, though, I don't believe, and I do believe that global warming, at least man-made global warming, is a hoax, and I don't think we should be making policy decisions based upon something that is unproven.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson, you have 1 minute.
Well, to my knowledge, the only thing that the whole carbon credit scheme has done for us is make Al Gore rich. So I think whenever government comes up with these schemes, it is subject to political abuse, and that's what we're seeing now. And I think, frankly, both my colleagues have just made my argument, which is most Americans want a clean environment. We're not interested in trying to destroy our environment. We want to enjoy it. But you get these bureaucrats who want to use their power to force us to basically adopt their worldview. And their worldview is that we're all dying and it's just a matter of time. And remember, Al Gore was predicting that by now polar bears should be going by on ice caps. but none of that has happened. So I think that free market principles are what we need, stewardship, not control.
Thank you very much. The next question is going to be directed to Chairman Stewart. It comes to us from Marcy Springett of Albemarle County, and the subject of the question is drug abuse. Recent statistics show last year 60,000 Americans died from opioid or various other drug abuse. Since there are so few psychiatric hospitals or long-term care facilities, how would you address this problem?
You know what percentage of opiates, artificial opiates, fentanyl and others, comes across our porous border with Mexico? 80%. Do you know what percentage of heroin, which is an opiate, comes across our border with Mexico? 100%. Building the border wall is necessary not just to keep out illegal aliens, but to keep out illegal drugs that are destroying communities here and families in the United States. We need to restrict the supply of the opiate, and we've got to stop it. It is destroying families, especially in Southwest Virginia and the Valley, but across the entire state. Now, it's a very difficult thing to address, but I do remember the 1980s, and then it was cocaine and crack, and eventually it was dealt with. But it's got to be dealt with, and one thing that we can do, and I know people who have personally done this, but I think that a reason a lot of people get addicted to opiates in the first place is because of legal prescription drugs that are provided to them as painkillers, and so they turn on that and they get addicted to heroin afterward. I think it is time that we offer up the use of medicinal marijuana for those who wish to treat their chronic pain. That's my solution, at least in the short term.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson, your thoughts?
Wow, listen, there's no way you can address the complex issue like this in 1 minute. But let me give you a quick anecdote. I went to the doctor one time many years ago, and I had a terrible cough, and the doctor prescribed me with cough medicine. And I got home, and I took the first teaspoon or two, and about 10 minutes later, I started noticing how good I felt. And I'm thinking, this is unusual. What did he give me? Well, it was an opioid-based cough medicine. And it had already started to make me high. Now, you know what I did with it? Threw it away. Now, why? Because there's something down on the inside of me that has a satisfaction that doesn't come with drugs. And frankly, it's my faith in God. It's my walk with Him. We've got to come back to this idea that some things are bad and unhealthy. You know, we spent a generation telling you guys and younger people that there is no real right or wrong, there's no real truth or falsehood. You know, everything is kind of up for grabs. It's time we came back to this idea that there are healthy things and there are unhealthy things, that there are good things and there are bad things. And here again, I know that's not the whole answer, but that's part of the answer that we've got to come back to. Because you know what, as long as there is a market for these drugs, somebody is going to sell them. And so we've got to go after the demand as well as the supply.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Delegate Freitas?
I think we need to rethink the war on drugs policy that we've had at the federal level. I think we also need to recognize that, quite frankly, when it does come to things like marijuana, it's not really the role of the federal government to regulate that. It's why I was a co-patron for legislation with respect to medicinal marijuana within the Commonwealth. The other thing that I would say, though, is that I carried additional legislation, which I was the patron for, that's passed. This one passed, Corey, so it's good. That's good. What we essentially did was we said that we have all this state property that is essentially sitting empty. Right, and we actually pay for people to go around this property, turn the lights on, flush the toilets, and keep it active, but it's not using and it's not fulfilling any specific purpose. And what I said is that I want 501c3s that specifically deal with drug addiction, and I was really focused on community-based organizations, because what I found through my research is that if the government comes in and tries to provide another program on this, it just doesn't work. But when you have a community-based program that is staffed by people, whether it's peers, people that have dealt with the same addiction problems, or someone that has been deeply touched by it, they go through and they actually do the research and they stick with it and they provide the people the sort of long-term care that they need to in order to be able to recovery and then get out of the environment which actually contributed to the behavior in the first place. I think the other thing that we need to do is we also need to look at some of our criminal justice reform with respect to who we actually give felonies to.
Thank you.
Because we
Delegate
have,
Freitas.
I'll stop there.
That's okay. Our next question starts off with Bishop Jackson, and it has to do with spending. I think this is an area that many of the people in the room share some concerns. The question comes from Kyle Hoffman of Glen Allen, Virginia. Many conservatives have been outraged by recent omnibus spending bill. What are your thoughts on the bill, and how would you change it if you were given the opportunity to weigh in on the U.S. federal budget?
Well, look, it was horrible, and I'm deeply disgusted by it. I'm sorry that the president signed it. I wish that he had put those vast negotiating skills to work to make sure that nothing like that ever got signed. I'm tired of being betrayed by people in the United States Congress who say they're conservative and then continue to load you guys, frankly, with debt. Believe it or not, I'm 66 years old. I know I don't look a day over 65, but you guys are going to be the ones saddled with all this debt. Look, there are a number of things from the symbolic things, which I know won't necessarily help the deficit, like not funding Planned Parenthood. I mean, to me, by now, we ought to have taken care of that and stop spending $500 million or more funding the destruction of our unborn children. I mean, that's a no-brainer. That's an easy one. Look, I'm glad that we're doing better with our military. We need to do better with our military. We've spent 8 years with President Obama doing everything he could to limit the military. I think, frankly, we've got to look deeper than just shaving off here and there. I think we've got to look at the fundamental role of the federal government, ask, are there things that we're spending money on that we shouldn't be spending it on? 75% of it, remember, is entitlement spending. And somewhere along the way, we're going to have to bite the bullet and say we just can't do that. We've got to come back to those principles I started when we opened, which is Americans take responsibility for themselves. Do you all remember, do you know from your parents and grandparents a time when the idea of an American taking charity from the government would almost get you punched in the nose? Because there was a visceral sense of pride. My dad was like that. I think we got to come back here again. We've got not only an economic problem, we've got a values and cultural and spiritual problem.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Delegate Freitas.
No, the omnibus bill, I think, was something of a betrayal. We've been telling the American people for a long time, put us in control of the House, put us in control of the Senate, put us in control of the White House, and we'll get spending under control, and we just demonstrated that we weren't willing to do it. And that's incredibly frustrating. And let me tell you why I specifically find it very frustrating. So I'm a veteran. I have 2 combat tours over in Iraq with Army Special Forces. I am really tired of being used as a political prop for why politicians want to continue to engage in profligate spending. Do you know what the military needs going forward in order to be secure? Do you know what the entire country needs? Fiscal soundness. Because if we're bankrupting the country in order to pay for the military right now, what does that say about the military 20 years from now? So the idea is you fund the legitimate functions of government. You can debate about everything else. I don't think you should fund illegitimate functions of government. Fund the legitimate functions of government. But then you actually need to do genuine reform with respect to what we're spending money on and how we're spending money. Because right now what we have is a situation where politicians are buying your votes with your children's money. Or in many of our cases, they're buying our votes with your money. And again, it's not just fiscally irresponsible, it's morally reprehensible to do that to future generations. So no, I did not support this omnibus bill, and I certainly want to support anything like it in the future.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart.
That was supposedly a Republican bill. It was really the Chuck Schumer bill. It contained everything that the Democrats, everything that the liberals wanted. It funded Planned Parenthood. It funded sanctuary cities, $1.3 trillion in additional deficit spending, and not a single dime for the construction of a wall. So why do they do it? Once upon a time in the United States Senate, you had chairmen who actually had authority, chairmen of the various committees that authorized spending. The Senate doesn't do it that way anymore. There's really only 2 people in the United States Senate who have any power whatsoever. And and that's Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer. We have to take them down, and I mean that very seriously. They are the problem. Unfortunately, we do have, fortunately, some in the United States Senate who cast their vote against that budget. But even those did not speak up and call for the resignation of Mitch McConnell. Before we can take back our country, we have to take back our party, and that means removing those who have betrayed us, namely Mitch McConnell.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Our next question goes to Delegate Freitas. It's from Matthew Baker in Charlottesville, and it's regarding Social Security. Social Security currently sits at over $900 billion a year, the largest single component of the U.S. federal budget. As Senator, how would you ensure the program's solvency and prevent spending on Social Security from crowding out other budgetary priorities?
So I think one of the biggest problems that we've had in the current political dynamic is that politicians like to say, we're going to do all these things, but we won't touch Social Security. Let me just be painfully obvious and honest with you here right now. Any politician, anybody that's running for office that tells you that they're not going to be able to touch Social Security is lying to you and is not worthy of your trust. Right? Social Security, as soon as it was moved in the 60s into the general fund, where now all of a sudden Congress can use the money from that to spend it on other things and then fill it up with IOUs, essentially it started to work like a Ponzi scheme. If the private sector was doing what the federal government is doing right now, people would be going to jail and everyone would be cheering. All right, the way that we have to get Social Security under control is to essentially do a couple of things. One, philosophically, we need to understand that the federal government has no constitutional authority, nor is it uniquely qualified to manage your retirement. Who in the hell, would want the federal government managing their retirement? Second of all, we also need to honor the commitment we made to the people that are currently dependent upon it. And so one of the ways that we do that is we allow future generations the option to essentially say, if you want to take a portion of your Social Security and essentially write it off and promise to never use the program, but then you get access to the other portion you pay in Social Security so you can secure your own retirement and the plan that you want, that's the way that we can gradually phase this out to make it an optional program to where we're no longer creating perpetual generational dependency on it, and we're actually giving younger people the option, because right now, if it continues to go as it is, you won't have it and there won't be anything close. You'll just be paying the taxes and receiving no benefit. So it's imperative that we provide a solution that provides future generations other options.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart, you have a minute?
Well, one way or the other, it's going to be reformed. You know why? Because it's unsustainable. And by the time that you all retire, and I'm talking to those of you who are in your 20s, it's not going to be there. It has to be changed, and you need to be demanding it here on campuses, not protesting about other things. You need to be protesting that. 40% of the United States budget, 40%, that's it, is discretionary. That means that Congress only appropriates 40%, $4 to $10. The other 60% is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and debt service. We don't even have control of our own budget anymore in this country. We're headed toward a brick wall at 80 miles an hour. Unless it's changed, not only will Social Security not be there, but this country is going to be losing further. We lost. We went down from a AAA bond rating status under President Obama when he took office, and now we're less than that. You know why? Because creditors no longer believe that we're going to be able to pay our debts. And when that happens, there's not going to be anybody to bankroll the deficit spending that is occurring in this country right now. It's going to be up to all of you. Not one senator is going to be able to change that. It's going to be up to public pressure to say, save our country, save its finances, and make sure that I, as a 20 or 25-year-old, am not paying into a system from which I will never benefit.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, after hearing this, I'm filing for my Social Security tomorrow, first thing. Haven't done that yet. Look, I diverge from a lot of conservatives on this. Because for me, Social Security is a sacred promise. It's a promise. Now, I think that promise has in many ways been perverted, but it's still a promise that we make to people, ordinary people, who will not earn the kind of money probably that many of you will make, that when they get to their twilight years, they're going to be okay. Now, here I am. I just confess to you all, to my wife's chagrin, that I'm 66, because that dates her. She doesn't like that. I haven't filed yet. Now, why? I don't really need it. But there are other people out there who do. And so I think we've got to look at ways to reform it and assure the people who have accepted that promise that it will be there for them. And one thing we've got to discuss is privatization. I think we've got to discuss treating that money like it belongs to the person who's actually putting it into the system rather than treating it like a Ponzi scheme, has been suggested. Galveston, Texas, as I understand it, has done this, and they've had remarkable success, that it actually has become a wealth-building tool for people rather than something that just creates more dependence upon the government. So yeah, I'm one of those people who is very reluctant to imply somehow that we're simply not going to do it unless we change the covenant that we made with the American people when we started Social Security.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Our next question, we'll start off with Chairman Stewart. The question comes to us from Adeline Sandridge of Albemarle County. Subject of the question is student loan debt. How will you work to make college more affordable and at the same time alleviate student loan debt?
Well, Professor, I don't think you're going to like my answer. If you graduate from UVA with a degree in gender studies, you're not going to get a job. That's a fact. Something's wrong in our university system. We're spending more per capita and more per pupil than ever before in our history. And so many of you graduate with loads of debt from this university, a great university, and others across this country, and you can't find jobs. That's wrong. That's an unfair burden to place upon you, and it's an unfair burden to place upon your parents as well. We need educational reform. We don't need to find more money for education. We just need to change what we're teaching. You know, it's unfortunate in this country that even today, some people feel that those who work with their hands are somehow less educated or so forth. We need to change that attitude, because the fact of the matter is that somebody graduates from a community college and knows how to weld, and they've got their certification in welding or any other construction trades, they're making more money than you. That's true. We need to fix it. But it's not by adding additional politically correct curriculum to your campus that is already riddled with it. That's got to be fixed, and that is what we need to do, is just frankly change your curriculum, and that will mean that some of your professors will be the ones without jobs.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. I have to make an editorial observation as dean of a school. Our first destinations report for last year's graduating class just came out, and 97% of the students at the Batten School are gainfully employed.
That's right. What's the definition of gainfully?
Bishop Jackson, do you have thoughts on student loan?
Yes, since you just made that comment, my website is ewjackson.com for all of those graduates. I was in a Best Buy with my wife buying an appliance, and there was a young man standing there before last year's, with the 2016 election, and I just engaged him and said, "How you doing?" He spoke. I said, "Who you voting for?" And he said, "Hillary Clinton." And I said, "Really, why?" And he said, "Because she's going to give us free education." And I said, "You realize it's not free, right?" And he kind of looked at me with a puzzled look as if I had said something very strange. I said, you realize somebody's got to pay the professors, and somebody's got to pay for the electricity and the heat and the books. And he said, "Oh, well, that doesn't matter. I just want it to be free to me." The federal government and its intervention in education, the same thing is true in the whole welfare system, and with Obamacare, with all of it, convinces people that there's a free ride, and there isn't. There just isn't. Somebody has got to pay for the goods and services that we obtain. And the best way to get prices down in any industry where the government intrudes is get the government out of the way. Because as long as it infuses dollars into the system, those dollars are going to be, basically prices are going to chase those dollars to keep bringing them in. And so I think the biggest problem we have with our education, aside from the cultural issues that my colleague alluded to, is the fact that the federal government has intervened and inflated the cost of a college education. I think we can get the federal government to back out of the system. I think we could begin to see those costs come down.
Thank you. Delegate Freitas, your thoughts on this?
So not only can the federal government not manage your retirement, guess what they're also not good at? College loans. If you look at inflation, from 1978 until right now, it's increased about 250, 255%. If you look at your college tuition, it's increased by 1,000%. So what explains that? Because it's not normal market forces. And what explains that is that once upon a time, if you wanted to go to college, there was about 3 ways that you did it. You got an academic or athletic scholarship, you paid your own way, or you got a loan for a private lending institution. Well, somebody in Washington, D.C. got the bright idea that that wasn't fair to people that couldn't meet one of those 3 criteria, so they decided to give out free money, i.e. tax dollars in the form of college loans. Now, again, it's not very free to you because you've got to pay it back. But let me tell you about the perverse incentives that this created within the marketplace. So in those 3 ways that I previously discussed, you had positive incentives to work hard in order to get a degree that was actually going to equip you to be economically viable. And universities had an incentive to provide you with a degree that was going to make you economically viable. But the moment the university can get your money because the federal government is just transferring it from taxpayers to you, to the university, and then you've got to pay it back over time, now all of a sudden universities have more of an incentive to just provide you a fun environment. Now, I'm not saying that happens everywhere, and I'm not suggesting you're not getting a quality education here. I'm saying that we've got to be very careful about the perverse incentives the government creates when it inserts itself into a marketplace that it knows nothing about and has no unique qualifications to try to manage. So if you move the government out of the process, we can return to more of a highly competitive market to where everywhere else in the marketplace you see lowering prices and increased quality, except in areas like education and healthcare where the government has inserted itself and planted a huge bureaucracy, and it has the opposite effect. You have an increased pressure on prices and a downward pressure on quality.
Thank you, Delegate. Our next question will begin with Bishop Jackson. The subject of the question is enforcement of illegal immigration laws by the federal government. It comes to us from David Karen from Charlottesville, Virginia. Do you support enforcement of federal illegal immigration laws at the federal level, including arresting mayors or governors who approve of sanctuary cities or states?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, the most essential role of the federal government is to provide for the safety and security of its citizens. I mean, that's its most essential role. And when it abdicates that by allowing people to willy-nilly release criminals onto our streets who kill Americans, rape Americans, rob Americans, and I know people say, well, you know, the illegal immigrant population commits less crime than the average citizen. That's not even the point. The point is they're not supposed to be here in the first place. And therefore, whatever citizen they harm would not be harmed were it not for the fact that they are here. And so it's important that the federal government take a strong stand. And let me add this. I have no use for these politicians who want to make themselves the equivalent of Dr. King by allowing Americans to suffer and die, acting like there's some sort of big civil rights hero by protecting illegal immigrants. I have no use for it. To me, it is a perversion of what the civil rights movement was all about. And yes, if I were a United States Senator, I would ask the Justice Department to investigate and ultimately prosecute those mayors, those public officials who will not cooperate with letting ICE do its job to arrest illegal immigrants and get them out of our country.
Delegate Freitas, your thoughts on federal enforcement of immigration laws?
So it is clearly and constitutionally the federal government's responsibility to enforce immigration law. All right, that comes with about 3 major things. One is obviously the enforcement. So when you find somebody that's actually guilty of breaking that law, there's a punishment, there's deportation, whatever it is. The other 2 are border security and then a merit-based immigration system. And the reason why we should move toward a merit-based immigration system is very simple. It's because it's actually better not only for U.S. citizens, but I believe it's also better for immigrants. Because what it does is it places the priority and the emphasis on people that want to immigrate here legally, that want to come here with something to contribute, and that desperately want to be an American. Right now, we have so much emphasis on people that have come here illegally. We have situations like happened in my county where I am desperately trying to help two people that came here legally, did it all right, and then got sent home because there was a mix-up between immigration and Department of Labor. So we need to refocus the emphasis back on legal immigration, providing a process to do so, and absolutely the federal government has to enforce this. Now here's one thing that's a little bit more nuanced, but I hope you will pay attention to this. If you were talking about the federal government coming in and prosecuting any state or local official that is not carrying out immigration law. Now, if they're obstructing it, you can absolutely, like what happened in Oakland, you can absolutely prosecute that. But if you're going to prosecute them for not enforcing, what you've essentially done is federalized every single law enforcement agency in the country, and that is a clear violation of federalism. So let the federal government do its job and follow the constitutional process like we did in Virginia, where we told, as a state legislature, that we expect our local and state law enforcement to cooperate.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart, your thoughts on the immigration issue.
If you notice, he didn't answer the question. The question is whether or not you would use the federal government to prosecute local and state officials who declare their jurisdictions as sanctuary cities. And he said last week during that debate that he would not. Now, I know that's a political liability, but the question is whether or not you've changed your mind. Here's why you need to prosecute those individuals. They are essentially declaring safe harbors for criminals. That is what's going on. And I am very, very close to this issue, as some of you know. In 2007, we had murders committed by illegal aliens, and finally the public had enough, and they asked us to do something about it. And I became the very first jurisdiction in the United States. It led the toughest crackdown on illegal immigration anywhere in this country. And so far, as a result of that, using local officials, local police officials, to apprehend, identify, and prosecute illegal aliens, and so far we've handed over to the government more than 8,000 criminal illegal aliens, and our violent crime rate went down by 48.7% in 2 years. That's what we got to do, and yes, we need to prosecute any local or state official who flaunts federal law and does not comply with those who are just trying to do their jobs to keeping us all safe.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. The next question goes to Delegate Freitas. Comes to us from Margaret from Charlottesville, and it has to do with trade policy. What is your position on President Trump's recently announced tariffs on China?
So let's be honest about what a tariff is. A tariff is a tax. That's what it is. Do you want the federal government telling you who you're allowed to basically do business with or who you're allowed to offer in exchanges with? The other thing that I cannot stand about tariffs with respect to who it actually affects is that it's generally the people that are at the lowest side of the income bracket. So if you're shopping at Walmart or if you're shopping at Target or whatnot, and then all of a sudden all of those products go up because we're imposing tariffs on a foreign country, that creates a problem. But there's also a reciprocal effect that's just as worse, and that's this. When you tax a material, steel, aluminum, or whatever it might be, you're not just taxing that, you're taxing every single product which utilizes it, which means now all of those respective industries have less money to hire people, less money to provide pay raises, less money to do bonuses, less money to innovate, less money to expand. So doing a tariff is a little bit about like poisoning yourself, hoping that it'll kill the other person first. All right, now, here's what I will say. I do respect the fact that Donald Trump is very good at negotiation and oftentimes does things or said things or puts into effect temporary policy to put himself in a better negotiating position. Because we do have a lot of bad trade deals that are advertised as free trade. They're not. They're managed trade where different interests have basically manipulated the books to ensure that they get a special advantage. But I want to move to more of a trade and really an economy in general where I don't have the government constantly stepping in and taxing and regulating my decisions and your decisions with respect to how we exchange goods and services. But we need to understand a tariff is a tax, and I don't support tax raises on the American people.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart, your thoughts on trade policy.
If you never actually follow through on a threat, people will never respect you in a negotiation. I'm an international trade attorney. My livelihood depends upon international trade, and I believe in free trade. The problem, of course, is that while we've been backing down every single time, even though we're the most powerful economy on the face of the planet, as we've been backing down, we're losing our industry. You don't have to go very far to see once thriving industrial centers in the United States and here in Virginia as well that are now ghost towns. You import a vehicle into the United States, there's a 2.5% tariff. You want to export it to the EU, it's a 10% tariff. You want to export it to China, it's a 25% tariff. We need to follow through with our threats, and they will back down. They are enjoying an $800 billion per year trade surplus with the United States. That means a trade deficit with us. It is time to put it through, and let me tell you something. When we do it, they're going to come to the table. They're going to come to the table because we just made it clear that we're actually going to carry through on our threats and protect American workers and American jobs and American businesses.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson.
I won the nomination for lieutenant governor 5 years ago and won 1 million votes across the Commonwealth. I'm the only candidate who's had that experience. I talk to people all over the Commonwealth, and I'll tell you what another tax is. Another tax is watching a grown man stand in front of you and cry because the job that he took care of his family with is going overseas. He's got to figure out how to support himself and his family because that's done. And it's not done simply because of the company making a rational economic decision. It's done because of government policies that made it more likely that that company would be forced to do so or would have advantages in doing so. Look, I think that the president is on to something here. He's on to something in trying to, I don't think it's inevitable that we completely lose our manufacturing base. And I think the president is on to something in trying to restore that. I think he's on to something, a point that's been lost, which is he said, you know, we can't afford to have all of our steel manufactured by outside forces. We need to have our own steel manufacturing base here because we need that for our weaponry. We need it for our military. So, look, I'm prepared to give President Trump the benefit of the doubt and watch him work this. And if I were in the U.S. Senate right now, I would be supporting him. I mean, generally, I'm in favor of free trade. I'm in favor of free markets. But we've been having our hat handed to us, and our people have been hurting. And to me, the loss of a job and the ability to support your family is the worst tax of all.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Our next question, we turn a little bit away from trade to national security. We'll direct the question to Chairman Stewart. It comes to us from Sarah Boast of Stanton, Virginia. President Trump recently tweeted that he's interested in a face-to-face meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. What do you think should be done to keep North Korea from obtaining nuclear weapons that threaten the United States?
I think you need to remind them that if they ever launched a nuclear weapon against the United States or its possessions or its allies, that there would no longer be a North Korea. That is what we need to do, and we need to be very serious about this. This is my background, it's international affairs, and let me tell you something, there's only one thing that a dictator understands, and that's strength and power. You need to stand up to them. You can't do what the Clinton administration did in the 1990s. Try to bribe them not into developing nuclear weapons. It doesn't work. Why? Because they're liars. They're only concerned about one thing, and that's maintaining power, and sometimes expanding that power into the southern part of the peninsula into South Korea. And absolutely, I think what the president is doing by, yes, we should never be afraid of negotiation, but it always must be from a position of strength. And reminding them, Professor, I respect your background in this area, reminding them that we hold all of the cards.
Well, I'm reminded of the fact that Muammar Gaddafi was an absolutely intractable, recalcitrant foe until Ronald Reagan put a missile in his bedroom. And he had an epiphany that maybe working with the United States might have its advantages. And look, George Washington said the best way to avoid war is to be prepared for it. And I think that President Trump is doing something that the former president simply didn't have the fortitude to do, which is let people know that if we have to use force, we will. Because that's the only credible way, in my view, of avoiding the use of force. And so, yes, I think that Kim Jong-un needs to understand that if he messes with us, it will be not only the end of him, but potentially the end of his entire country. I think that's got to be on the table. I'm very glad, by the way, that John Bolton is going to be the new National Security Advisor. I think that was the best choice that the president could have made at this time.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Delegate Freitas, your thoughts on North Korea?
Well, I actually spent some time training South Korean special operations, and I can tell you right now that when you look at it from a comprehensive view, South Korea really has everything they need from an economic standpoint and a military standpoint to be able to defend themselves against North Korea, with the exception being the nuclear threat. Unfortunately, the United States has displayed a lot of weakness, especially in the 90s under the Clinton administration and subsequently under the Obama administration as well, with the way that we interact with dictators. We need to understand that Kim Jong-un has probably done more than any other leader in the world to suppress and oppress his people to the point where they really have no conception of what is going on outside the world. You don't engage a dictator like that unless you're doing it from an absolute position of strength. And the dictator needs to believe that you will use whatever is required at your power in order to ensure U.S. military victory and dominance within the region. However, you need to be very, very careful about engaging in open-ended negotiations with something like that, because it will be used as a propaganda tool in order to shore up his control over his own people. I think the best way to engage in a place like North Korea is you need to start engaging with dissident groups that you have operating on South Korea so that you're able to influence what's going on the northern side. Because I will tell you this, go watch a documentary on North Korea, or if you've ever spent any time on the peninsula, I can tell you it is amazing. If you've ever looked for a more stark contrast between what happens in a free economy and a free society and a despotism, North Korea and South Korea is it. But again, we have to operate through a position of strength and not give Kim Jong-un any opportunity for propaganda.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Our next question goes to Bishop Jackson. This comes from Scott Friesen in Nelson County, and it has to do with the use of drones in the war on terror. The Trump administration recently announced a drone strike in Libya. Do you support the current administration's approach to the war on terror? And what should be different if we should change anything?
Well, I'll tell you, it's certainly a lot better than the approach we had over the last 8 years, because we're actually seeing results. And for me, that's what ultimately matters. We've got ISIS has been driven back. Their claims of hegemony in Syria to a caliphate have basically dissipated in the face of President Trump's policies. I think that the president is sounding the right note and letting it be known that he is prepared to do whatever is necessary to decimate this enemy, as opposed to what we used to hear from the former administration, which was it was just kind of a problem that we would manage somehow. Look, you asked about drones. I thought you were going to the whole issue of civil rights, because in my view, the Obama administration's toying with the idea of using drones on American citizens is something I would object to very highly. We have not heard that from this administration. So generally speaking, until we get into specifics, yes, I support the general direction in which the president is taking us in fighting the war on terror.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Delegate Freitas?
So a drone is a tool, and it's no better or no worse than the mechanisms in which it's used and the legal framework in which it's used. My concern really is not so much with drone use in one way or the other. My concern is the fact that Congress has completely abdicated its responsibility with respect to aggressive military warfare. So again, I say this as someone that served 2 combat tours overseas. I certainly understand when it is necessary to deploy men and material into harm's way in order to defend the Constitution and defend the United States. What I am tired of is Congress, whether it's under the War Powers Act or whether it's under not reforming FISA or just automatically reauthorizing military use, is that they're not, once again, claiming their responsibility for sending men and women into harm's way. And they do this on purpose. It's a win-win politically for Congress, because what they essentially get to say is that when everything's going fine, they authorize funding for the military operations. And when things start to go bad, they just blame it all on the president. So I've been very encouraged by the fact that the president is incredibly supportive of the military and is willing to give on-the-ground commanders the freedom that they need in order to execute operations in a way that actually makes sense for the operational environment, because I can tell you it was not going that way under Obama. But I want to see Congress once again reassert itself into the decision-making process when it comes to sending men and women overseas, because quite frankly, I expect men and women in the Senate to display an ounce of the courage they expect out of our men and women in uniform before they send them into harm's way.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart.
The president is the commander. The president is the commander-in-chief, and we have to provide him his due latitude with regard to foreign affairs and the use of our military overseas. That said, our standard with regard to our national foreign policy, with regard to our foreign policy, must always be U.S. national security interests first. And I think that the time has come to declare that the United States is no longer the world's policeman. It doesn't work. How did it work in Iraq? A country that posed no national security threat to the United States, but now it does because it's become a hotbed for terrorism. How did that work in Egypt when we tried to overthrow a government, only to have it replaced by the Muslim Brotherhood, which is antithetical to U.S. national interests? How did that work in Syria, where we tried to overthrow, yes, a brutal dictator, only to be replaced for part of the country by terrorists? And how did that work in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi? We supported the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi, and now we have another breeding ground for terrorists that do, in fact, pose national security threat to our interests. We need to scale back. And we need to take a look at what we're actually accomplishing with these involvements in the Middle East and throughout the world. That standard must always be the U.S. national security interests. I don't care what happens in Syria or Egypt or any of those other countries unless it's in the national security interests of the United States of America. And by the way, this is not a new idea. This is the idea that was implemented during the Reagan administration to great effect.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. The next question, it's all right, we're going to switch to Delegate Freitas. We're also going to change gears a little bit, and we're going to come much closer to home to here in Charlottesville. The question comes to us from Martha, ironically from Alexandria, and it has to do with freedom of speech. The events of August 11th and August 12th in Charlottesville threatened minority groups in Charlottesville, but also around Virginia and across the nation. So, how can we protect the freedom of speech while also keeping our cities and campuses safe from hate speech?
Well, I think the first thing that has to be mentioned is that, again, looking at people marching in Charlottesville with Nazi flags and advocating for white supremacy was just absolutely abhorrent. To have family members that fought to extinguish that regime and then to watch people on our own soil advocate for it is just something that turns my stomach in a way that I can't even properly express. Now, one of the things that we have to guard against is that in our abhorrence of their actions, we also understand that we protect and we have certain things that we enshrine within our Constitution because we recognize the necessity that in order to protect your freedom of speech, I have to protect the speech of somebody else that is saying something that I disagree with. We cannot go down the same road that we're starting to see in England right now, that we're starting to see in Canada, where they actually set up tribunals for hate speech. I was talking with someone once that said, well, Nick, hate speech is different. It shouldn't be protected the same way. I said, well, what's hate speech? And as they began to explain, I said, well, who decides what hate speech is? Oh, well, the government. I'm like, okay, great. Donald Trump's president. Do you want him deciding for you what hate speech is? And she absolutely did not, and that's the problem. Liberty and freedom also comes with a degree of personal responsibility. The way that you combat a bad idea, like Nazism, national or National Socialism, which is what Nazism was, or white supremacy, is you combat it with a good idea, which is liberty and freedom and recognizing that each person has inherent intrinsic value. And so the way that we have to combat things like that is we need to make sure that when they show up to protest or say whatever they're going to say, whenever they drag 300 people out of their mother's basement to come and advocate for Nazism, we show up and we let them know that that is not the sort of thing that will ever prevail in this country.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Chairman Stewart.
You know, what was interesting about Charlottesville was there were two sides who did something that you're not supposed to do in America because it's not necessary. In a constitutional republic, you do not have to turn to violence to express yourself. You should never do that. But it was two sides, and President Trump was absolutely right in stating so. It wasn't just the right. It wasn't just the neo-Nazis and the other despicable groups who were committing violence. It was Antifa. Tim Kaine's son is a member of Antifa. Did the left ever condemn Antifa? Did the media ever condemn Antifa? Did any other Republican condemn Antifa other than myself and President Trump? Good. Good for him. There's number 3. Good for Tom. There were two sides in that. And in fact, it looks awfully suspicious when it looks like Governor McAuliffe and perhaps the city of Charlottesville actually directed the police to stand down and try to force the two sides into battle, perhaps for their own political ends. It was despicable. It was a failure by politicians here in the city of Charlottesville. It was a failure by the Democratic governor. And when the other side does something, we need to call them out as well, not just their own people.
Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson, you'll have the last word this evening on free speech.
You know, I'll be very honest. While I found the whole thing abhorrent, and I did condemn both sides and got a lot of flack for doing so, I'm not as concerned about what two different groups of nutcases do. I'm concerned about what we do. You know, you all realize in 8 days, we will commemorate the 50th anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. 50th anniversary. I wonder what he would think right now when everywhere you look, everybody's a white supremacist and everything is racism, and we gotta have separate black graduations, and we gotta have separate facilities, and we gotta have separate dormitories. And I think it would make him weep, because he wasn't interested in trying to separate us. He was interested in trying to bring us together. That his vision was that we would all sit down at the table of brotherhood. Remember that? When our children would play together without regard to the colors of their skin, that we would judge one another not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And I think we need to focus on the vision of who we want America to, what we want America to be, and who we as Americans want to be. Because you know what the reality is, I think most Americans look at these white supremacists and they go, forget those crazies. And most Americans look at Antifa and forget them. I think it's about us. And I think we have got to come together and be committed to fulfilling the vision that we all say when we put our hands over our hearts, that we really want to be one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's why I'm running in part. That's what I'm fighting for. And yes, I condemn white supremacy, of course, but I also condemn Louis Farrakhan, because he's just as bad as any white supremacist.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Now, I'm looking up at the clock up there, and one of the things I've noticed is that they say as time flies, as you're making great progress. We started off with a conversation about issues close to home here. We went around the Commonwealth. We covered issues having to do with national security and trade that affect our country and international politics. We've returned back home to Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and basically one of the core foundational right that distinguishes the United States of America from other countries in this world. I think that's a great time for us to move to our closing statements. Each of our candidates will have 2 minutes to tell you what they think and their views about why they're the best candidate to take on the Democratic Party in the upcoming United States senatorial race. We'll begin with Delegate Freitas.
Well, again, I think one of the reasons I got on this race, and Corey reminded me when he said something, when he said, talking about the whole thing in Charlottesville, he goes, well, it wasn't just the right. That wasn't the right. That's my whole point. None of those people have ever represented what I believe ever within the American political tradition, period, the end. Because ultimately, I believe that everyone in this room is uniquely and wonderfully created. You have a purpose that you are going to fulfill in this life, again, to the benefit of yourself, your family, your church, your community. Because that's how I see you. That affects the way I look at government. I don't see you as being some cog in a government machine. You're not some part of some grand plan that a politician or a political elite has. You have a right to live your life in accordance with your definition of happiness. And because I recognize that, I understand that government has to stay within certain constitutional limitations. And then when it focuses on the thing it's supposed to do, protecting your liberty, protecting your property, providing you equal justice before the law, you are able to realize what it was you were put here on this earth to accomplish. And that is an incredible thing, because I've been to a lot of countries in the world. I've been to a lot of countries with oppressive governments, because the military sends you to a lot of places that are on nobody's bucket list. And I will tell you, what we have here is unique and is special, and I see it being eroded from within, because more and more young people are being convinced that socialism, that centrally planned economies is the way to go. And I have to tell you, the primary difference between the philosophy of liberty and the philosophy of control is this. The philosophy of control and socialism is predicated on the use of violence against otherwise innocent people. I reject that. I believe you have intrinsic value. I believe the government needs to protect it so you can go out and live your life the way you want. And that is the beauty and the promise of this country. And that's why I'm running for the United States Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Freitas. Thank you. Chairman Stewart, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Professor. Our Constitution is a pact. It's an agreement between those who govern and those who are governed. If that pact is broken, the people are no longer subjugated to that government. The people no longer need to even represent or recognize that government. Our rights, our First Amendment rights, our Second Amendment rights, it's not a coincidence that they were listed first in the Bill of Rights, folks. Without your First Amendment rights, without your freedom of speech, you don't even live in a democratic form of government. And why is it that the Second Amendment is there? It's there because our founders, it's not that they trusted government, folks. It's because they didn't trust government. The Second Amendment is not there so that you could forever hunt. It's there to remind the government that they cannot suppress the people. And never has that been more frightening, and never have your Second Amendment rights been more threatened than today. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Why is it that at every single opportunity the left tries to exploit every tragedy in this country to try to suppress your Second Amendment rights? Why is that? Your suppressor is not those who are protecting your Second Amendment rights. Your suppressor are those who are trying to take them away. Now, that punk, Mr. Hogg, who's been speaking around this country, doesn't understand that. He's been brainwashed. You know, he called those of us who are, I'm about to turn 50. We're old, what did he say? Old something, I'm not even used the word. And at some point, my generation, Generation X, is going to be going away. And your generation, the millennials, and then Generation Z, you're going to be coming into power and you're going to be controlling this country. Our nation is always one generation away from extinction. It will be up to you to fight those who are trying to take away your rights. It will be up to you. And I believe that this generation, all of you sitting out there, I don't believe for one moment, and all this propaganda that this is the weak generation, it's a soft generation, I know that there are people who are trying to make you soft. But don't be soft. And never give up on any of the rights which have been bequeathed to you by the founders and your prior generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Stewart. Bishop Jackson.
Well, some of your fellow students, I noticed in the news a few months ago, wanted to cover up the statue of Thomas Jefferson because they know he was a slave owner and therefore is not worthy, perhaps, of being honored or commemorated or celebrated. But I say that instead of denigrating our history because of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and the fact that it once had slavery, we ought to honor and celebrate our country because this is the country where a son of slaves can run for the United States Senate, and there's no other nation like ours. Now, I have a vision for where our country needs to go because the Bible says where there is no vision, the people perish. And my vision of America is a nation where all of our people are sufficiently informed that they understand the Constitution and honor it. And much of what's been said tonight demonstrates that many of them don't. They don't understand the First Amendment. They don't understand the Second Amendment. They don't understand the Bill of Rights. They don't understand the limited role of government according to the Constitution. I have a vision that that will change, whether we're on the left or the right, that we will honor what the Constitution actually says. I have a vision in which the day will come when we'll honor our Judeo-Christian values. People say, you know, guys like you want to have a theocracy, and nothing could be further from the truth. It is precisely those values that makes me honor the humanity of another human being, no matter who you are, whether we agree or not. And by the way, I want to say this clearly as a minister. I don't have to agree with you or agree with the way you live in order to respect you as a human being, whether you're gay or transgender. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to persecute you. I don't want my government doing that to you. I don't want anybody doing that to you. That's part of our Judeo-Christian ethic and value and history. It is not us, conservatives, who are trying to hurt people because they disagree with us. It is the left that is trying to hurt anybody, in fact, destroy anybody who disagrees with them. And what we've got to do is work to bring our country together. So I charge you all. You are the generation, people your age, stormed the beaches at Normandy, faced machine gun fire, lost their lives, bled and died to make sure that nobody would have to live under Nazism and lived under the tyranny of a dictator. And you have something to be proud of. You have a legacy that you've inherited. I want you to stand up for that legacy and don't quit on us. Keep fighting for it and keep persuading your fellow students to stand up for it. And lastly, let's all believe that the day will come when we will again join together and not disrespect our flag and not refuse to stand for our national anthem, but all come together in pride for what this nation has given us and given our parents and those who come after us, and sing our favorite, my favorite patriotic hymn, My Country 'Tis of Thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. God bless you, God bless the Commonwealth, and God bless the United States of America.
That was great, EW. Even for your standards.
Well, first and foremost, it's very clear that we have some extremely spirited and passionate candidates, and I couldn't be more excited for this upcoming election cycle. I'm also would be remiss to forget to talk about how I am extremely proud of how policy-oriented this debate was, given that we are in a school of leadership and public policy. I want to give a couple thank yous and then talk about a little something that we have for our candidates, and then let you off to enjoy the rest of your evenings. First and foremost, we want to thank our three wonderful candidates for being up here today. We really appreciate your time and coming to speak with all of us today. Your reach out to young people really matters to us, and we really do appreciate it. Thank you to the audience for coming, spending some of your time in your very busy evenings, skipping studying for exams to come spend the time with us. And to the rest of the public for being out here, we really do appreciate it. Some quick staff thank yous. Greer, Kelly, Josh Skiles, and Aaron Torr were incredibly helpful throughout this entire process. We thank you immensely. Professor Craig Volden, Dean Allan Stam, Professor Andy Pennock, Professor Jerry Warburg, thank you all so much for your help in facilitating this. As soon as we knew we wanted to host a debate, we knew the right place to go was to the Batten School, and we couldn't be more thankful. The student volunteers and the college Republicans, thank you so much for your help in this process. To the RMC staff and the police officers you have here to protect us, thank you so much for what you give to us. thank you for ensuring that this event was safe and productive, and we really appreciate that. Two final thank yous. First to two of Adam and I close friends who are very good advisors and helped us out through the process, Allan Garber and Noah Rudnick. We really appreciate your help in this. And my final thank you goes to Adam himself. Adam has put in so much countless time and effort into this. I can't tell you how many middle of the night calls we've had talking about just logistics and different ideas. And honestly, I could not be more proud to call him my friend and my chairman. So my final comment will be, in 1806, George Wythe bequeathed to Thomas Jefferson cups. And these were a symbolism of friendship and achievement in order to thank Jefferson for that friendship. And Jefferson eventually melted these cups down and created 8 smaller ones, some of which can still be seen at Monticello. And so we thought it fitting that to show our friendship and achievement and admiration for these candidates, that we would all get them